President-elect Donald Trump hasn't taken office yet, but he's already making some pretty bold statements. He's talking about buying Greenland, retaking control of the Panama Canal, and making Canada our 51st state.
Trump has emphasized how he wants to keep the US out of foreign wars. During his first term, though, he was aggressive in promoting America's interests on the world stage.
Now Trump's team is saying that his latest posture is part of a broader strategy. World leaders are flocking to the table because President Trump is already delivering on his promise to make America great again. That is Trump transition spokeswoman Anna Kelly telling the Washington Post, quote, "When he officially takes office, foreign nations will think twice before ripping off our country. America will be respected again, and the whole world will be safer."
Another spokesperson, this time anonymous, told the Post, quote, "Trump knows what levers to pull and what guardrails there are, and he's in a position of power to utilize those levers." Canada announced earlier in December that it was ramping up spending on border security. Trump's transition team said this was proof that his strategy was working. Meanwhile, former Republican Representative Carlos Corbello of Florida told MSNBC this week that the Trump strategy could backfire.
These kinds of insults could provoke them into a confrontation with the United States. And obviously not a military confrontation, because none of those countries could compete with us in that way. But it really does just kind of deteriorate the relations between the U.S. and other countries. And we know that can be important when it comes time to build international coalitions, when it comes time to try to sign new trade agreements. So there is a risk here, even if it's a negotiation tactic.
I don't know about that. I think Trump has already brought Trudeau to heel and actually maybe toppled Trudeau's entire government. And I don't want Canada to become the 51st state.
Glad to hear it, Robby.
Well, because
it would cost you too much money for your libertarian likings,
it would cost the Republicans too many electoral votes.
Oh, that's
think
right.
Through this strategy for a moment.
That's right. Two more Democratic senators representing Canada.
2 more Democratic senators and a lot more electoral votes for the Democratic Party. So let's not do that. Maybe it can be a colony.
I think we don't necessarily want to renew
No. I don't want that.
Imperialism.
I don't want that. And I don't want to, retake Panama or we don't want to take Greenland by force if they're selling. It might make sense to buy it. What would be great is to have better trade relations with the governments that oversee these territories, have them be free trade zones where we can all benefit and America can enrich itself economically. There's a lot of energy and shipping aspects to both Panama and Greenland. Greenland, obviously, this giant landmass that is not particularly green. And if you've looked at a map from the 17th century, the Mercator projection, Greenland is the entire world because of the distortion that occurs at the poles. It's not quite that big, but it's still pretty big.
It is, but look, I
think 2 people live there.
I think
if they're Republicans, then we can give Greenland some electoral votes to be fine.
Counterbalance Canada for you. Look, there's a whole big, the big picture here is there are some of these comments that Trump makes that appear ludicrous and you can actually defend them to a degree. I wouldn't always do so, but I mean, Greenland is something that Harry Truman had designs on at one stage because of its strategic importance. There is a legitimate issue about Chinese expansionism in many of these places, trying to expand its footprint and influence, and whether it's in the United States' interest to try to push back on that. Most people, including me, would say that is in America's interest. The problem is Trump just has this propensity to blurt out these things, and even if you take the generous view that they're a negotiating tactic, there is always the danger that he just gets it wrong or that he miscalculates. So tariffs on Canada and Mexico, this idea that there'd be 25% tariffs on imports from each, I think you and I, despite our other differences, both think that's a bad idea. It would raise prices on American consumers. And if it is being done as a threat, the problem is the other countries know the threat, if followed through upon, would have detrimental effects on the United States and would have detrimental effects on Trump's popularity. This is always the danger in his kind of hot-headed approach, or even this idea that, well, he's just sort of pretending to be crazy as a negotiating tactic. it is very high risk. And yes, you know, the Panama Canal will probably not be seized back by the United States after all this time. It was Jimmy Carter who signed the treaties that, passed that area back to Panama. But the overall approach of sort of hyperbole and these grandiose claims by Trump, I think does have risks.
Yeah. I mean, it's administered by Panama. Obviously, countries around the world get the advantages of the reduced shipping time for moving through it, and that's a good thing. You know, yeah, Trump engages in a lot of bluster. I often don't agree with or don't love some of his rhetorical flourishes, but I know from the first Trump administration that the governance itself was pretty standard Republican. I would argue that, yes, while he says things that you might imagine would inflame world leaders or could lead to some kind of global insecurity, that mostly did not materialize during his first term, and it looks like world leaders are welcoming him back. I would say there has been a lot of global instability over the course of the Biden administration. Now, Biden was certainly much more rhetorically reserved, and that suits my taste just fine. But then the question becomes, and I absolutely did not think this at the beginning, but I'm coming around to this way of thought, that there just wasn't a respect or a fear of Biden that led him to be disrespected by other world leaders and allowed for some of this instability we've seen with Russia, in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't respect Joe Biden or feels like he can do whatever he wants, and Biden will never scold him for that. I don't know for sure that that's different with Trump, but I think it might be.
I think that there are, I mean, obviously I have lots of legitimate criticisms of Biden in foreign policy terms, not only in relation to Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians, but also, I mean, the withdrawal from Afghanistan was shambolic, and it really put a hole beneath the waterline of Biden's approval ratings that he never really recovered from. But I think that's a very different argument from saying, because Biden made mistakes, therefore Trump will be better. That is not guaranteed at all. It is equally possible that things could go off the rails with Trump in an even more dramatic fashion. Yes, he is unpredictable, but he is also somebody who I think doesn't really have much patience for thinking through these things a lot of the time, acts at a very superficial or visceral level where certain world leaders annoy him because they don't kiss up to him as much as he would like, or have crossed him in some fashion. I worry about his just lack of thought on these matters.
Sure, he is more so this time around so far than last time, listening to people I generally like and I think might be good influences on him. You know, for instance, with illegal immigration, it's looking clearer and clearer that the deportation is actually not going to be some mass deportation, you know, send the military door to door to collect everyone, which I think would be terrible, but more limited concentration on violent criminals, which is certainly well supported by people in America to have that kind of action. The people I agree with more have won the visa fight. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. So despite the rhetoric and the bluster, what I'm so far seeing, it's very early, he hasn't even taken office yet, something in line with policies that I want. And I certainly want us to get more value out of places like Greenland, Panama, have a good and healthy relationship with our Canadian neighbors, be able to trade, have mutually beneficial economic arrangements, not tariffs. As you said, we don't want tariffs in place. That hurts them and hurts us. It hurts the American consumers. It will worsen prices. So I hope it just remains a threat and we work things out. But we got to give Trump some time to see how it works.
We shall see how that goes. I think it'll be a risky business. There we go.
More Rising right after this.